At Team Toyota, they've been selling and servicing new and used Toyotas in your community for over 50 years. And you can reserve your next new Toyota with them today. You'll get a realistic timeline, and even in this crazy market, they won't charge you over MSRP. Or don't wait at all. With over 75 certified Toyotas, including a bunch of RAV4 and Highlanders, you can drive one home today. And you can always trust them to maintain your current vehicle. Their service and collision centers are high-tech, comfortable, and will save you time and money. Team Toyota can help you go anywhere you want, but they'll always be your hometown team. Just visit teamtoyota.net and choose from 3 locations in Langhorne, Glen Mills, or Princeton.
Hey folks, thanks for checking out another edition of the Phillies Talk podcast down here in Clearwater, Florida with another spring training update. I'm Corey Seidman. This was an interesting day here at Baycare Ballpark for the Phillies on Wednesday, the second day of full squad workouts. Interesting in the sense that a lot of these young, intriguing pitchers were on the mound showing what they had. The big highlight of the day Wednesday was Andrew Painter throwing a live batting practice session on a side field. Obviously, Andrew Painter, there's so much hype around him, the Phillies' top prospect, one of the pitchers competing for that 5th starter spot in the Phillies rotation. I think if the fan base had their way, Painter would win that job, but there's still a lot to play out during camp. I mean, that's a battle that includes Andrew Painter, Bailey Falter, Christopher Sanchez, Griff McGarry, another one of the Phillies' young pitchers, and also Nick Nelson, who was the Phillies' long reliever last season, is going to get a shot in camp to potentially win that job. Manager Rob Thompson also revealed today that Nelson will start the Phillies spring training opener Saturday in Clearwater against the Yankees. It'll be Nick Nelson in the home game, and then a split squad game on the road in Lakeland against the Tigers. That'll be Michael Plasmeyer, who's another candidate for that 5th job. But really, if you were to handicap it, Falter, Painter, Sanchez, probably the main 3 guys competing for that spot. Falter and Sanchez because they have the big league experience, and Painter obviously because he has the most upside of all of these guys. I got a chance to talk to Bailey Falter on Wednesday, just take his temperature, see how his offseason went. I mean, last year, Falter had the biggest workload of his career, ended up throwing 131 combined innings. And you remember, he was so important for the Phillies in August and September, really throughout the entire second half, as Zach Wheeler and Zach Eflin dealt with injuries. Where would the Phillies have gone last season if they didn't have Bailey Falter? They might not have made the playoffs. That whole postseason run could have just been a dream if not for the presence of Bailey Falter, the fact that he was a swing man that they could use in relief earlier in the season. But clearly, his main role, the primary role the Phillies would like to see him in would be starting pitching. If he doesn't crack the opening day rotation, perhaps he's, the next guy up. He probably would be the next guy up. Teams never go through a season with just 5 starters. But to get back to Falter in a minute, the big scene that everybody's going to be talking about from Wednesday was Kyle Schwarber taking Andrew Painter deep in a batting practice session. It was kind of funny. So the first batter that Painter faced was Brandon Marsh. Brandon Marsh joked about how much media was on this one particular backfield to watch Painter. He said, was this guy supposed to be good or something? And everybody laughed. Marsh goes up and as I said yesterday, if you listened to the podcast yesterday, this is the time of year where hitters are mostly just tracking pitches, trying to see fastballs, trying to see spin, more focused just in getting the timing down than making solid contact on February 22nd. So Marsh, swings and misses and takes. He actually hit a ground ball in between first and second and yelled out, "Hey, there's no more shift. That's a hit," which, hey, maybe it would be a hit. It was in between first and second, but Marsh hit against Painter, and then Schwarber was the next guy, and they both took turns. And the next time Schwarber came up, the at-bat ended with him going deep, taking a curveball that was high in the zone over the right field wall, and Schwarber jumped up in celebration. He said, "Suck it, Painter," just joking around. But Rob Thompson actually talked about later in the day that he was very impressed by the way both Painter reacted to that and the way the rest of the Phillies teammates reacted to that. Painter kind of was able to laugh it off and move on. And a cool scene was that Schwarber took Painter aside after that session, and you could see that he was giving him some tips, tips about pitches or tips about his delivery. And those are the kinds of teaching moments that can be really beneficial to a young player. I mean, Kyle Schwarber has thousands of big league plate appearances. He's seen every type of pitcher there is to offer in the major league. So being able to get some firsthand upfront experience from a guy who just faced you. Those are the kinds of things that help players develop in camp. Painter's not the only young player in this camp, obviously. I mean, McAble, who's the Phillies' first-round pick the year prior, probably a little farther back than Painter and McGarry in terms of like major league readiness. But Griff McGarry also on Wednesday was blazing that fastball, pitching out of the stretch on another side field. He's a guy the Phillies are excited about. Even if he doesn't end up winning a job out of camp, Griff McGarry is someone who could potentially help the Phillies at some point this season, probably will end up helping the Phillies at some point this season. And there are a couple of those guys in the clubhouse. There's, Andrew Baker is a relief prospect. Francisco Morales is a relief prospect. Johan Rojas is an interesting outfield prospect, probably the Phillies' best position player prospect at this point. And that was something that Trey Turner actually said earlier this week. He said this to John Clark on the Takeoff podcast, but he said that, he's really encouraged by the mix of high-priced veterans who have accomplished things in the major leagues that are in this clubhouse, but also the hungry young players. And that aspect of like the hungry young guy, you don't have to look too far back to see how important that is. Look to 2022 when not every single player on the Phillies roster really throughout the season had their big moment, whether it was like Matt Vierling or Nick Maton, young guys you weren't expecting a ton out of that still came through and produced. That raises the level for everybody else. I mean, it makes things more competitive in a camp or in a regular season atmosphere, but it also just, increases a team's confidence that they can turn to anybody, mostly anybody in the clubhouse they're going to be able to produce. So it is an interesting blend of youth and big outsized personalities, big names in the Phillies clubhouse. And that's without Bryce Harper even being in camp. Harper, who's recovering from Tommy John surgery, has not arrived yet in Clearwater. If he does get here, it's going to be, closer to like the first or second week of March, you would think. But the games begin on Saturday. The Phillies' first spring training game is going to be televised on NBC Sports Philadelphia, 1:05 p.m. against the Yankees. That's this Saturday. Rob Thompson said you should expect to see a lot of the young guys pitch. I mean, that's usually how this works, that early in camp, the young guys are getting their reps. And then as camp progresses and the things like timing for hitters and pitchers like strictly developing their workloads become more important. But early on, it's going to be a way to see a bunch of different guys, some of whom could help you this year, some of whom might be helping in the future. But definitely like a very relaxed vibe around Clearwater. This is the time of year where everybody's chill, everybody's, optimistic and thinking about all the possibilities. A couple other guys had a chance to catch up with on Wednesday. Craig Kimbrel, it was nice to catch up with him for the first time. So he, there's this like perception of Craig Kimbrel that he's this, potential future Hall of Fame closer who's only known the ninth inning for the most part. And if he's in another role, potentially it might not go well. I mean, people look back at the year that he was with the Cubs and dominated in the first half as a closer, then was traded to the White Sox, started setting up for Liam Hendricks and struggled in that second half. So I asked him Wednesday, like, to you, is it that simple? Is it that simple that, okay, you went from the ninth inning to the eighth inning and that's why things changed? And he said, no, it's an easy topic. And anybody can look at it and say, okay, now he's not closing. But for him, it was more so just about location, how he felt, what he was or was not doing at that point. Kimbrel also talked about his year last year at the Dodgers. He said it was like a heartbeat up and down, which it was. He had dominant stretches, but he also had stretches toward the end of the year where the control wasn't there. He actually ended up losing that closer's job. The Dodgers mix and match toward the end of the season into the playoffs. And that is most likely what the Phillies are going to end up doing in 2023, which is mixing and matching based on what pocket of the lineup is due up. You might see Jose Alvarado if it's lefties. If it's right-handed guys, that you might see a Sir Anthony Dominguez. But the Phillies have multiple options. And Kimbrel said, he knows what his role is with this team. He knows that it's not like a defined closer's role, that he hopes to get a lot of ninth inning reps, but he knows that it's not going to be the case every single day. So, that's one of the topics at camp. Who's the closer? There are these big questions. Who's the fifth starter? What's the closer situation going to be like? One of the questions is who's going to lead off this Trey Turner versus Kyle Schwarber conversation. There's the bench. There's the final bullpen spot. And, people love roster battles, obviously, because, you think about that 1 through 26 on opening day, even if that's not what the 1 through 26 looks like, even 2 weeks later, it's still, it's a focus. It's it helps people kind of put in perspective where their team stacks up around the league. So those final few spots of the Phillies roster are going to be up for grabs. There's going to be a lot of competition for them. The bench, some interesting dynamics going on. There's Derek Hall, Cody Clemens, Dalton Guthrie, Jake Cave in the mix for these two spots. And performance in spring training is going to take it a long way, but also keep in the back of your mind that there's always the possibility that a team can add during spring training. If there's developments in other camps where a player's not getting enough playing time and is reading the tea leaves or has an out in his contract, you see moves like that happen all the time where someone who might be projected as the final player on the roster at one point in camp, get closer to opening day, other players become available, things can change. So just know that this is all fluid as the Phillies go through spring training here. But with games just a few days away, this is starting to feel real again, right? I mean, it was a short off season for everybody. The players have talked about it. The pitchers have talked about how, it was a month later that they were picking up a ball again. Like Bailey Falter said he picked up a ball the day after Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving. So, I mean, you think about it, the Phillies had just stopped playing baseball like 3 weeks earlier. So there's a good reason all that happened. But by the same token, this was a condensed offseason for the fans, for the players, for the media, for all of us. But it's right at the precipice again with the first spring training game taking place on Saturday. So that's the latest from Phillies camp. One other development is that Rule 5 pick Noah Song has been discharged from the Navy. He was in the Navy. He's going to report to Phillies camp tomorrow, which is February 23rd. So there's only one player who's not in camp. That's Gregory Soto, the reliever the Phillies acquired from the Tigers this past offseason. Soto has had visa issues getting out of the Dominican Republic. And kind of adding to that concern, perhaps concern isn't the right word. Yesterday, Rob Thompson talked about how the fact that Soto is on the routine that he would be on anyway in terms of throwing makes the Phillies feel a little bit better. But he's also participating in the World Baseball Classic for the Dominican Republic. And those guys are leaving around like March 5th. I talked to Alvarado yesterday. He says he's leaving around March 5th. The WBC begins on March 8th. So depending on when Soto gets here, he might not have any time in camp. And Thompson said that is a consideration here, that the Phillies are going to have to make some sort of decision in the next few days because they want to get him into games before he has to leave for the World Baseball Classic. Again, I know I've repeated this several times on recent podcasts and in articles, but the reason that this is so important this year is because it's not just trying to get ready for the season. It's also trying to get ready for the new rules. It's trying to figure out, can I be as effective as I've been with a 15 or 20 second pitch clock with nobody on base or with men on base, right? That's a huge factor, especially for relievers who are used to taking their time late in games in high pressure situations. So, if there's one outstanding concern as of right now, it would be, when does Gregory Soto get to camp? Can he get up to speed? Because he's a big piece of this bullpen. You think about the back of that bullpen with Dominguez, Alvarado, Kimbrel, Soto. You have Matt Strahm, who Matt Strahm told me earlier today that he's really excited going into this season because it's the first full offseason he's had in at least 4 years. That he blew out his knee earlier in his career, and in the years since, it's been a lot of rehab throughout the offseason, trying to get into shape for the season, whereas this past offseason, it's been all about throwing. So, Matt Strahm was the first bullpen signing the Phillies made, the first bullpen addition they made. He joked, yeah, all these guys they added, I might be the mop-up man. Be a pretty expensive mop-up man if that's the case. But that's the latest from down here in Clearwater, Florida. I'm going to try to do these podcasts as much as possible leading up to opening day. So hope you enjoy it. Thanks for checking it out. Catch you tomorrow.